Villains are an essential part of any story. They pose as the main obstacle for the hero/protagonist to overcome, and with the proper writing and direction, they can be one of, if not the best part of any story. This holds true for the many villains Sonic has faced over the years, as some of them offer great entertainment. Sadly though, they can't all be winners, and there have been a few blunders here and there. So how about we rank all of them and give them either their just rewards or their just desserts. As for the qualifications for this ranking, I'll only be including villains from the games, and they have to be at the very least one of the main threats to the heroes, which unfortunately excludes Gerald Robotnik from the list since he's only really mentioned rather than shown until the very end of the game. But that's honestly for the best since he was never evil to begin with. However, I will include Merlina since she's a twist villain, impacts the last stretch of the game greatly, and has a main presence throughout most of the game. Also, if they appear as a villain in some games but are heroes in others, I'll only include them if they appear as villains more times than heroes, meaning that characters like Knuckles, Shadow, Rouge, Blaze, and Silver do not qualify for this ranking. I also won't be including, to the disappointment of many, the Babylon Rogues, because I'm not sure they really qualify as villains per se. They're definitely rivals to Team Sonic, but by the end of Riders, they're more friendly rivals, rather than the out for Sonic's blood rival that Mellow Sonic is. Now regarding the villains that do make the list, I'll be judging them based on their design, their presence and actions as the main villain, their motivations, if any, for being the villain they are, and their boss fights, and the music that plays for them as a bonus, if any of them deserve it. If any villains fall short in any of these categories, it will be a major factor in where they're placed in the ranking. That should be everything, so let's get started. The bottom spot in 2 rankings, eh? Well, honestly, he deserves it. Imperator X is one of the most textbook villains I've had the displeasure of witnessing. To begin with, his designs are kind of generic. I mean, the first one looks fine, but the other is as bland as you can get for an evil akin to Warlord. Speaking of which, his motivations and backstory are generic as well. He was the leader of the Nocturnus clan who were imprisoned in the Twilight Cage for conquering most of the world. So he uses the Chaos Emeralds to break him and his clan out of the cage and attempts to conquer Sonic's world. So not only is he your standard everyday megalomaniac, but he also offers nothing original or new to the table. Every word he speaks is just generic trite you hear every cartoon warlord speak. And furthermore, he's barely even in the game for a good chunk of the playtime. Then there's his boss fights. There are 4 total. The first 3 are very easy and forgettable, and his final fight, if you recall, I gave the award for the worst fight in Sonic history. Say what you will about the other bad Sonic villains, but at the very least, you remember them. X is so bland and boring that it almost feels unnecessary to put him on the list at all. But that's the way it works. And we're just getting started. From one boring tyrant to another, King Arthur is only slightly better than X. I'll give him this. His design is legitimately threatening, which is one thing X lacks. However, he's still a lackluster villain. He's not in the game very much, he has barely any characters to him when he does show up, and even though it is revealed later on that he was just another underworld demon made by Merlin, it doesn't change the fact that he's so bland. Then there's his whopping 2 boss fights. The first one is actually the first fight in the game, assuming you don't count the tutorial dragon. It's easy, but it's the first boss, so it's understandable. The other one is maddeningly difficult, but DT already read about it before in Best and Worst Sonic bosses, so just go watch that video. It's a bit of a shame because he is built up as a threatening king throughout the game, but his lack of real presence, character, and quality boss fights make him a lot worse. Still better than X, but not by much. Yet another basic and boring warlord. Black Doom is almost insulting. Admittedly, like with King Arthur, he does have a fairly intimidating design, and it portrays his alien warlord identity well. However, his personality and backstory leave a lot to be desired. Black Doom is the leader of the Black Arms, a clan of world-conquering aliens. 50 years ago, he made a deal with Gerald Robotnik that he would give Gerald some of his blood to create Shadow, and in return, Gerald would use Shadow to bring him the 7 Chaos Emeralds. Interesting backstory, but his actual character is anything but interesting. Due to this game's morality system, Black Doom can either be a boring and generic warlord, or a complete dunderhead. In the hero path, he's constantly asking Shadow to help him, even though it's pretty obvious that he's not on his side. And when he is on his side, Black Doom only spouts generic warlord talk that does nothing but bore me to death. Then there are his 2 boss fights, one of which you fight 3 times in all 10 required playthroughs, and is the best fight in the entire game, as I praised before, so kudos. The other one, meanwhile, is the final boss, which I've already ripped to shreds in the final boss ranking. Many people believe that Black Doom is unnecessary, and I'm kind of right there with them. He's not the absolute worst villain the franchise has ever seen, but given what he offers, Shadow would have been much better off without him.
Then get ready to die. Let me show you the ultimate power in the universe.
What can I say about Iblis? Well, he's not a good villain for one. His designs, in my opinion, are pretty boring. I guess I can see young players getting scared of him, but no matter which version I look at, he's just a generic lava monster. He does have a slightly more interesting backstory though. Iblis along with Mephiles make up the being Solaris, with Mephiles being the mind and Iblis being the power. They were split from each other during the Solaris project, and Iblis was sealed inside Princess Elise for 10 years, until he was released via Elise's death aboard the egg carrier. Then he took the form of the lava monster we see in the future and ravaged the world. However, there's a bit of a problem here. Since Iblis is just the power of Solaris, he lacks any real mental state, and as a result, he's just a raging beast. So unless you're, again, a younger player, you're likely not going to be intimidated by Iblis. As for his fights, there are 3. One of which DJ and I have actually covered in the best and worst Sonic bosses video, so I won't waste my breath other than saying it's the worst fight in the game. The other 2, however, are actually kind of neat. Sure, they just amount to throw stuff to win, but the environments look really cool, especially the first ones. This looks more like a final boss than the actual final boss of Silver's story. However, due to its other generic pieces, Iblis can only be placed so high. Plus, there are just better brainless giants out there.
Come on, Iblis! This time I'll finally stop you!
But better doesn't always equal good. Dark Gaia manages to exist as a villain. Gotta give major props to his design. Its base form is already pretty scary, but its perfect form is practically an eldritch horror. Unfortunately, it suffers from the same problem as Iblis in that it's just a raging beast with no mind or soul. Its backstory about being the polar opposite to Light Gaia and destroying the planet every 1,000 years is kind of interesting, but its only real presence is at the beginning before it splits, and at the very end for the final boss. At least Eggman gets yeeted into space. Speaking of the final boss, there are 2 different versions. One for the PS3 and Xbox 360 version of Unleashed, and one for the Wii and PS2 version. If you've seen my final boss ranking, you'll know how I feel about both, so I'll sum it up like this. The better games version is subpar, and the worst games version is amazing. That's all you can really say about Dark Gaia. A perfectly serviceable villain, but nothing more. Well, the first and only pirate villain Sonic has ever seen. Why is that? Well, you would be forgiven for thinking that Captain Whisker was a serious threat. After all, his design, despite the DS's limitations, does look rather intimidating by pirate standards. However, instead of taking a cool-looking but not at all subtle villain and making him a dangerous threat, they made him a total joke. Now, I must emphasize something. Joke villains are not bad villains by default. After all, Dr. Doofenshmirtz is one of the most beloved villains in media, and he's a complete joke as well. But the reason for that is that his jokes are hilarious. Whiskers aren't. To be fair, I did chuckle a bit at his big introduction towards the end, and his "I'll not tell you how to open the door while telling you how to open the door" bit. But every other instance, Whiskers just meh. I don't laugh, chuckle, smirk, or even think, "nice try but no cigar," at the rest of his jokes. Literally all he does is try to be serious but come off as a complete buffoon. And even though it's intentional, it just paints him as incompetent rather than funny. Even his sidekick Johnny, who I excluded from the list due to lack of screen time, is a big nothing. but at least they're not incompetent when you fight them. This fight kind of walks the line between decent and frustrating. The attacks basically consist of Johnny charging, and Whisker firing his arms, breathing fire, ripping off Mario, and sometimes throwing Johnny. But it's really not that hard at first, especially since it's really easy to stun lock them, but then the Saw Blades come in to either be a mild nuisance or a game changer. Not to mention, there's a constant barrage of and which gets old fast. I suppose you could also count the Ghost Titan since that's the only mech Whisker directly pilots, but it's a similar case. You just get the attacks, be they physical or cannon fire, to attack the shield surrounding the nearby cannons until they deactivate, use the cannon to shoot yourself at the Ghost Titan's face, and wail on it a bunch. The last bit is admittedly pretty cool, as Whisker attempts to kamikaze by taking the entire ship down, but it's only one part. It's a damn shame that made Whisker like this, because like I said, if you showed him to anyone who hadn't played the game, they'd think he's a cool villain, but they just degraded him into an unfunny joke that's a decent fighter at best and annoying at worst. I really hope that if Sega decides to make another pirate villain, they make him a real threat. Okay, before I start, I must ask that you hear me out before you start raging, because I'm about to attack a classic. I know, Chaos is an iconic villain, but I can't help but feel like 90% of his status as such is based purely on nostalgia, because when you really look at him, is he really that good of a villain? To start off, his design may be iconic, but I always found it a bit basic, like he's just a generic water monster from the get-go. His other forms are kind of neat, but they don't go beyond okay for me, except for Chaos. That form is genuinely awesome. His backstory is also neat, as he was once a normal Chow before being transformed by Chaos Energy to become the Guardian of the Chow. But when Chief Pachacamac attempted to take the Master Emerald, injuring multiple Chow in the process, Chaos slaughtered them all in a fit of rage. Tikal then sealed Chaos and herself within the Master Emerald, until he was freed by Eggman. However, that's where the positives stop for a bit. Chaos has very little personality to him, and for a good majority of the game, is just a pawn in Eggman's plan. Even when he rebels later down the line, he's still just a beast. Then there's his boss fights, which are all over the place in terms of quality. Chaos Zero is incredibly easy, but it's the first boss of the game, so that's forgivable. Chaos 2 is also easy, and is the first boss Knuckles fights. That's less forgivable. Chaos 4 has been torn apart by DT in another video. That's unforgivable. Chaos 6 has 3 different versions, with one being 15 seconds long and the other 2 existing at best. Luckily, Perfect Chaos is a great final boss, which I've already praised in the final boss ranking. Same with the Generations version. There is also an optional fight with him in Sonic Battle, but he's not a villain in that game, so that fight's being disregarded. I'll admit, Chaos has some pretty good things going for him, but most of the stuff he brings to the table ranges from okay to bad, kind of like the game itself. I do somewhat understand why he's a popular villain, but personally speaking, he doesn't deserve that status. Now, if only Forces could have at least attempted to change that. You know, when this Eggman added Nega to his name, I don't think he realized how well it fit him. Eggman Nega is Eggman done worse, which is somehow possible. I do like his design, it portrays an opposite Eggman well, but that's probably the biggest positive I can give him. In terms of backstory, he's actually got 2, with only 1 actually being true. In Sonic Rush and Sonic Rush Adventure, he's the Eggman from Blaze's dimension. And in Sonic Rivals 1 and 2, he's the Eggman's descendant from the future who wants to undo Eggman's failures which ruined his family legacy. Which is true? The Rivals canon, which on one hand does make his character a tiny bit more compelling, but on the other hand, it not only makes the Rush games confusing, but also doesn't help his bland character. Dr. Eggman is a cartoonishly evil villain who hams it up most of the time, but can be deadly serious when he wants to be. He's got a defined personality that makes him incredible as the main villain of the franchise. Eggman Nega has none of that. In fact, if you were to put me on the spot and name his character traits, I'd fail miserably because I can't tell what his personality even is. How does a villain show up in 4 games with 2 different origin stories and barely have any character in all of them? I guess this also portrays his opposite Eggman motif, but that's hardly a good thing. As for his fights, well, there's a lot of them across 4 games, but only 2 I could genuinely say that I enjoyed, both of which happen to be the final bosses of the Rush games. The other fights range from existing to slightly annoying, but luckily none of them sink as low as Chaos 4, which is why he's a spot above Chaos. Regardless, it boggles my mind how they chose to take a character like Eggman Nega and do the bare minimum with him. He has so much potential to be as great as Eggman, but it's always squandered. Hopefully the next time he shows up, assuming there is a next time, he'll bring a personality worth a damn.
How was that?
Hey! I've been looking for you, Baldy McNosehair. Who are your friends?
Friends? These are nobody's friends. They are the Deadly Six, and they are your worst enemies. What?
Yeah, I'm actually separating Zavok from the rest of the Deadly Six so I can talk about him on his own. After all, Sega does like to reuse him and not the rest of the Deadly Six. With that said, these guys are loathed by the Sonic community, but speaking personally, I don't find them nearly as bad as people say they are. For one, all their designs are at the very least okay, and they get across their personalities well. For two, the only one of them that I genuinely dislike is Zor, because A, he's an emo, and B, he's got the worst boss fight of the two versions. Xena just sort of exists as the vain one, even though Sonic Roastinger does get a chuckle out of me, and her boss fight in the 3DS version does mildly annoy me, but not as much as Zor's does. MasterStik is pretty alright as the wise sensei of the group. He's nothing outstanding, but I'm hard-pressed to call him bad. Zolmom actually gets me to laugh as the glutton of the group. I mean, come on, there's a scene of him horking down a 12-foot sandwich, which, by the way, he only comes close to finishing around the end of the game. Zaz, meanwhile, is my second favorite of the six because of how passionately sadistic he is. There are quite a few quotes from him that make me laugh at how delightfully insane he is, such as,
You're going home in a box!
and,
I'm gonna skin you alive!
and...
I'm gonna...
However, I will admit that they aren't really that threatening. The game does try to make them seem threatening, but only once do any of them other than Zavok actually feel like a threat. Not to mention, all of their fights in the Wii U version either exist or are a total joke. The 3DS version does have harder fights, but they're still not that hard up until the last world. Again, I don't hate these guys, and I firmly believe that they get too much hate. But I'll fully admit that they're not exactly good as villains due to some glaring flaws. Even so, I'll gladly be the only person on the internet who's willing to give them credit where credit's due.
Let's hurry up and destroy him! You and I have unfinished business.
Surprised to see Lyric this high? Well, like I said in the Sonic Final Boss ranking, I kind of like Lyric as a villain. First off, he's got a really good design. A cybernetic snake never looked so intimidating. Regarding his backstory, the general consensus is that this is the best thing Lyric has going for him, and I'm actually in agreement. He was part of an ancient civilization called the Ancients, real clever there, before one day deciding to go after some powerful crystals to try to understand their power. And you know what? Since the scene is pretty darn good, I'll let the snake himself explain the rest.
Just spitballing here, boss, but can we just let him off with a warning this time?
Did they warn me that working to unlock the power of the crystals would make me sick? Did they warn me that their feeble organic medicines would never be able to heal me? No, they didn't. I had to make this to keep myself alive. Technology is the only thing you can trust, which is why I'm going to rid this world of all organic life forms and rebuild it piece by robotic piece.
Now, a common complaint with Lyric is that he barely does anything in the game, and I kind of do, but also don't understand that criticism. On one hand, oftentimes he's barely doing anything in the scenes he's in, but on the other hand, there are a handful of moments where he does come off as a genuine threat, like in this chase sequence, and the moment where he forces Sonic and company to give up the crystals in exchange for Sonic's life, only to backstab them immediately. Sure, he may not have actually killed Sonic, but his efforts are there. Besides, it's more than what Shattered Crystal gave us with his 5 whole scenes of screen time, 2 of which are just him talking, and another 2 where he actually does something that matters. Then there are his 2 boss fights, which were covered in the final boss ranking, so I'll just give you an idea of their quality. The console version's good, and the handheld version's bad. Like the Deadly Six, Lyric gets too much hate in my opinion. Sure, he's flawed, but he does his job well enough. He could have been better, but he remains the best part of Rise of Lyric.
Our unfinished business is finished.
Every single drop before you got it.
So the famed Genie of the Lamp decided to be a villain, eh? Well, he does a decent job. Erazor Djinn may not have much to his design other than being an evil genie, but he makes up for it by being one of the most powerful villains Sonic's ever faced. Erazor is capable of destroying entire universes within the Arabian Nights. Heck, by the time you're done with the tutorial, he's already destroyed 100 of the 1001 that exist. He then proceeds to curse Sonic with a flame that will end Sonic's life when it's extinguished, unless Sonic brings him the 7 world rings. But he doesn't just sit pretty in his throne room for the rest of the game. No, he continues to terrorize the universes by summoning monsters, summoning the Ifrit to burn away the rest of the book, and kidnapping King Shahryar. But why is he like this? Well, a long time ago, Erazor was sealed in his lamp as punishment for his crimes, and would only be free once he granted 1,000 wishes. But when he finally did, he had a strong hatred for humanity, and desired to become strong enough to remake the Arabian Nights and the multiverse outside in his own image. Interesting take on an old character. As for his boss fights, I've covered both in previous videos, so I'll just say that the first is annoyingly difficult, and the other is pretty good. Erazor's actions may be numerous, but he somewhat lacks any real personality other than stereotypical villain, which is what holds him back from being truly good. Still though, he plays his part well enough to be considered an above average villain.
The world is mine! I cannot be denied by that filthy rat! Why?
I told you, I'm not a rat! I'm a hedgehog!
Ah, Infinite. Such a waste of potential you were to so many fans. Everything about this character just screams Edge, and I weirdly like that about him. His design is very cool, and the poses he makes are reminiscent of another villain that we will most definitely get to later. His backstory isn't explained all that well in the game. Instead, you have to read a tie-in comic to get it, which is frankly absurd. In any case, Infinite was the leader of the Jackal Squad, a band of mercenaries who invaded Eggman's base to steal his tech and sell it. However, when Infinite got a hold of the Phantom Ruby, he saw a wasteland, and Eggman convinced him and his Jackal Squad to join him. A bit later, Shadow took down this whole squad and beat up Infinite, calling him worthless. Infinite didn't take this very well, to put it super mildly, and donned a mask and the Phantom Ruby to become an unstoppable being of nigh infinite power. Hence his name. I'll admit, his backstory is wonkily executed, but at least he's interesting character-wise. Infinite, as we see him, is obsessed with being the strongest being on the planet, refusing to accept defeat, even when actually beaten. His power to warp reality admittedly isn't explained well, but the general gist is that he creates an effect around a certain area that warps the fabric of reality to create whatever he desires. It makes for a cool villain on paper, but definitely confusing in execution. With these powers, he is able to completely body Sonic without him being able to touch Infinite, and given that Sonic is the strongest hero in the multiverse, everyone else is pretty much screwed. He continues to show off his power by decimating soldiers with ease, and still being able to beat down Sonic despite him being much stronger than before. And in the climax of the game, he creates a literal f***ing sun to drop on the Resistance. Yeah, you can't deny that's impressive. As for his 3 boss fights, the first of which takes place on a snake as you run towards Infinite and get close enough to hit him while avoiding the red constructs that will temporarily mess with your mind if you touch them. The second fight is Infinite using his projections to either fire homing shots or create walls of the stuff and just charge at you. You just hit him with a homing attack when he's done charging, or your Wisp on if you have one with enough range. The third one is basically Metal Sonic's fight again, which I've talked about not that long ago. All these fights are decent, but most of Force's bosses aren't anything special. What is special is his theme song, which has absolutely no shame in being edgy whatsoever.
When everything you know has come and gone, always dying, rising high, only scars remain all through. I'm finding the ashes, losing the sun. When there's no one left to carry, this is an illusion. Open up your eyes, there's pain. I can't resist, but that's what it takes to be infinite.
Honestly, despite my soft spot for Infinite, I will admit, because of the way Forces was made, he could have been so much better than he is. There was a lot of potential for this character, but despite that, I still like him for what he is. That being a total edgelord.
Fine. I will teach you fear then pain, and then, well, at least the fear and pain will end. Hello, Sonic.
Yeah, I've been looking for you.
And we've been looking for you. Unfortunately, we found your friend Tails first.
Hey, you hurt one hair on his head!
Oh, don't worry. We're actually making him better. He'll be much happier as a robot.
No!
Now we're getting to the villains I feel passionate about, starting with the devil and Bowser wannabe, Zavok. Well, that's what the haters call him, and it's not hard to see why looking at his design. However, I for one think that he stands apart as his own unique and good villain, for several reasons. Zavok was trained by Master Zik in martial arts and is the leader of the Deadly Six. I gotta say, he has an incredible aura of intimidation. You could tell he takes his role very seriously, and he has the utmost respect for his master, and despite scolding them often, cares greatly for his Velocity. Remember that cutscene I showed you earlier? That has to be my favorite cutscene in the whole game, precisely because of how threatening it portrays Zavok. The fact that he's able to get under Sonic's skin with the mere mention of Tails, combined with the demonic sounding music, fits perfectly how evil he is. And then they brought him back for Forces and TSR. Now, to clarify, that's not an inherently bad thing on paper. As long as it's justified and everything that made him good in Lost World is kept intact, Zavok can work outside of his own world. But that's the problem. The only part of him that they borrowed to keep is his personality, which thankfully remains mostly intact. In Forces, it's just a phantom copy of Zavok, which weirdly acts like the real Zavok, despite Shadow stating that the copies have no heart or soul. And in TSR, he's literally there for no reason other than, we need a power-type character for Team Eggman. The first one comes off as false advertising, given that one of the major selling points of Forces was the return of 4 iconic villains, including Zavok, and the latter is just plain lazy. Thankfully, his boss fights are pretty good. He has 3 in Lost World and 1 in Forces. The first one in Lost World is really simple, as you just need to homie attack the dragon's tail as it drives around trying to electrocute you, homie attack your way up to Zavok, and hit him to knock him off. Do this twice, and you win. The second fight I've already talked about in Best and Worst Bosses video, as well as the 3DS counterpart. Meanwhile, the third one is pretty alright. It first starts off with just as easy to get fights with you being able to wail into him a ton, but then he grows gigantic, not being very subtle, are you, Sonic Team? Zavok will climb his way up while firing the laser and fireballs to trip you up, and you need to slam down on as many bombs as you can to bring him down. It's simple, but effective. Then there's this fight in Forces where he's pretty good too. This time he's riding a robot wasp and summons smaller robot wasps while also firing a laser and slamming the ground. You just wait until he slams into the ground, launching you into the air, and homie attack him thrice. We also get this gem of a scene.
Lose to the likes of you again!
That was a blast! Bring some chili dogs next time.
People do say that Zavok has the problem of being restricted by the writing and the games he's in, but if those same people still like him in spite of that, he's gotta be doing something, right? Whether or not you see him as just another Bowser clone. Just try not to bring him back again in Frontiers, Sega. He doesn't need to be in everything. But if you absolutely insist on bringing him back again, treat him with the utmost respect.
One by one, your friends are falling. Soon, you will be all alone.
For about 80% of the game, Merlina has been your ally and friend. She's the one who summoned Sonic here to begin with and taught him the basics of sword combat. But there have been a couple moments where she acted a bit strange, as if she's hiding something. Sure enough, once you kill King Arthur and take the scabbard of Excalibur from him and give it to Merlina, this happens.
Well done. And thank you, Sonic. With this scabbard, I can erase my grandfather's greatest mistake.
What?
I shall make this kingdom eternal.
Yep, the sorceress was a little snitch the whole time. When you confront her in her newly made castle, Merlina's gained a new look that makes her look more like an evil empress with a slight aura of sadness. Which brings me to her motivation. Merlina has lived her life seeing death come to others, including her own grandfather Merlin. She wishes to use the power of the scabbard to make a never-ending world. But Sonic refuses to let her because the natural cycle of life can't operate in the eternal world. Merlina then proceeds to effortlessly beat Sonic down without batting an eye. And if you've seen my final boss ranking, you'll know the details from there and how much I adore her fight. So instead, I'm going to go a bit more in depth regarding her boss theme, With Me. The lyrics of her song describe her sadness involving death, and her confusion as to why Sonic opposes her painfully well. And yet, it also hints at a darker side to Merlina that has other plans for the eternal world. You'll have to really listen to it to really see.
You know, every world will have its test. Don't blame for what I have become. You know, every world will come to end, and I'll create a final rest. I can taste the day, save the night, scream your dreams as you dare to fight, dare to fight.
After her defeat, Sonic gives her the hard truth about reality, but also reassures her that as long as she lives her life to the fullest, she'll be happy. In the end, Merlina accepts Sonic's offer. It's weird how a Sonic game of all things is willing to deliver such a thought-provoking villain to the table and execute it very well. Shame we haven't gotten more stuff like this, but at the same time, not everything needs to be philosophical.
You would not understand, nor could you understand. That's why I must do what I must do. I am finished with you.
If you've seen DT's top 10 rivals in video games, you'd know for a fact that this next villain would be this high from the start.
I am the ultimate overlord, Metal Sonic.
How could I not put Metal Sonic this high? It's Metal Sonic, one of the most recognizable villains in all of gaming, next to Eggman himself. You'd be forgiven for thinking that Metal Sonic is just nothing more than a plain robot Sonic doing what he's been programmed to do. But a few games reveal a bit more. In Sonic Heroes, where he defies Eggman to try to conquer the world himself, he showcases that there is in fact a mind and maybe even a soul behind the metal.
Long time no see, Sonic. My lonesome copy. I was created for the sole purpose of destroying you. But I can never seem to defeat you. That is why I transform my own body with my own hand.
Exactly thought you could defeat me by transforming into a monster?
But that was the past. Now you're nothing but a speck of dust to me. See me as I am, no longer afraid of anything.
That doesn't feel like just a robot doing what he's programmed. There is genuine hate here. Even in other games where he's just an Eggman lackey, you can tell that he's still trying his hardest to kill Sonic. What makes Metal so threatening is that he is the perfect rival to Sonic, even more so than Shadow, able to match and even surpass Sonic's speed. But the reason he keeps losing is ironically his desperation to kill Sonic. He may try different tactics every time, but because he was made to be exactly like Sonic, Sonic's able to figure out his every move. Metal's trapped by his own program, and it limits him from ever truly understanding why he loses all the time. Heck, at the end of Heroes, he outright asks Sonic how he can keep beating him. But that's enough character analysis. How are his boss fights? Is what I would be asking if I hadn't already covered almost all of them, and only one of them I found outright bad. The rest are 9 times out of 10 the best in their respective games, and on the rare occasion that they aren't, they're still quality. Some people have said that Metal Sonic has been undermined in recent years, but dude, if he can be awesome in Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric of all things, there's no way he's been undermined. Metal Sonic remains a great villain to this day, and he sure as heck ain't slowing down anytime soon.
All living things kneel before your master.
Of course Eggman's this high. He couldn't be anywhere else. Like Metal Sonic, he's one of the most iconic villains in gaming history, with plenty of character to him as well. In the old days, he was a bit more of a serious villain, but as time went on, he became a bit more cartoonish in his demeanor, while still retaining some of his serious nature from the early days. This is of course where the fanbase is split the most when it comes to how they want Eggman to act. Some people want a more serious Eggman, and others are happy with Eggman being cartoonish. Frankly, I'm on the latter side. In fact, I don't understand anyone who says that Eggman isn't serious at all anymore. I mean, if he really wasn't serious, would he split apart the planet to awaken an eldritch deity, build an entire amusement park in space just to hide a mind control cannon pointed at the planet, and even siphon some of the planet's energy just to power one of his mechs? Yeah, anyone who seriously thinks Eggman isn't serious anymore clearly doesn't pay attention, and hasn't seen this moment from Lost World.
I will burn your world, you rebellious scum! I will destroy everything you love and make you watch!
Boss, your hands!
As long as I can still strangle a Zeti, my hands are fine.
I know his campy side can sometimes distract people, but that's part of his charm. Eggman has been, from conception, a cartoonishly evil villain, and having him be super serious all the time like in the old days makes him a little generic in my opinion. There's a reason Jim Carrey was cast to play Eggman in both Sonic movies, because he's the only actor capable of capturing the essence of Dr. Eggman. Heck, he practically is a living cartoon. Anyways, as the main villain of the franchise, he's had too many boss fights to count, a lot of which are fun and equal amounts not so much. To save time, I'm going to list off all the ones I think are his highs in rapid fire. Final Zone from Sonic 1, Death Egg Robot from Sonic 2, Big Arm from Sonic 3 and K, Egg Viper from Sonic Adventure, Egg Emperor from Sonic Heroes, Egg Wyvern from Sonic 06, Egg Dragoon from Sonic Unleashed, Nega Armor from all three versions of Sonic Colors, Time Eater from Sonic Generations 3DS, and Death Egg Robot from Sonic Forces. What else do I need to say? He's the Eggman. It's what he is.
No matter, I may have suffered a setback, but this thing's far from over. I will crush Sonic!
If you saw my Sonic 06 video, then you know very well just what I believe to be the best villain in Sonic history. And I've been waiting to gush about him ever since the video started.
Such foolishness. Very well. Let's see if you can entertain me.
Mephiles the Dark is by far the most evil and most powerful villain the Sonic franchise has ever seen. He is the mind of Solaris, the god of time itself. But during the Solaris project, he and Iblis were split into two beings and destroyed everything in one blast. Shadow, having time traveled to the past, seals him within the Scepter of Darkness for 10 years, until finally being released and obtaining a new form through Shadow's Shadow. Speaking of which, Mephiles is downright freaky. I know 06 isn't the most pleasant game in the series graphics-wise, but Mephiles is probably the best looking character in this game. His first form may be mostly a faded version of Shadow, but his green reptilian eyes, complete lack of a mouth, and his zombie-like walk make him all the more unsettling. This is the form he takes when he manipulates Silver and Blaze into following him into the past, and when he attempts to manipulate Shadow later on. Speaking of that, when he fails to convince Shadow to turn on humanity, he goes from freaky to scary. This is the iconic Mephiles we all know. While he still retains Shadow's form, his body is completely crystallized with no feet, bony hands, blood-red eyes, and no eyelids to speak of. This is his form for when he's done with the tricks and wants to kill his opponent. That's Mephiles' character for you. He's a schemer first and a fighter second. He prefers to use his cunning to trick his foes into believing him so he can backstab them later. And he's so good with words that even if you know he's lying, you can't help but consider if it's true. But should he fail, he drops the act and goes for the kill. He doesn't spare his opponents out of mercy or respect or even pity. When he wants them to die, they will die. Now for his two boss fights, which are honestly some of the better ones in the game. In the first fight, he takes the form of your Shadow, that is legitimately terrifying, get it away from me, and summons hordes of Shadow creatures to swarm you. You'll need to take out as many of them as you can to fill up Shadow's Chaos meter to activate Chaos Boots, which blasts Mephiles out of your Shadow. Then you just gotta attack him however you can before your meter runs dry, while Mephiles throws purple energy balls at you. You even take control of Omega for more of the same. The second fight, however, is even better. This time he coats the floor in black substance and creates these huge monsters that fire lasers at you. Same as before, you take out the monsters to fill up the meter, and activate Chaos Boost to get Mephiles to show himself and attack him however you can. But Mephiles will have more tricks like duplicating himself and at the end flying high up to drop a giant energy ball on you. The music for both of these fights perfectly encapsulates Mephiles' personality, with slow, eerie bits for the schemer and hectic, violent bits for the killer. And the second theme even plays them in the order in which Mephiles acts. And then there's his best moment, being the only villain to actually kill Sonic. Lear couldn't do it, Erazor, Infinite, and Eggman almost did it, but Mephiles actually did do it. The reason for killing Sonic is to make Princess Elise cry and release Iblis from her body. I have heard a lot of people say that this moment is way too convoluted, and I've defended it in the 06 video, but in retrospect I realized I didn't think it all the way through. So I rethought my position on it and came up with something better. Think about everything he's done in this game. He could have taken the easy way out, but no. He went out of his way to bring two broken fighters from the future into the past with the hope of giving them a better future, only to pull the rug out from under them and crush everything. And even when Silver expresses doubts about going through with killing Sonic, Mephiles insists that they go through with it. It's not until Elise is saved from death that he finally takes matters into his own hands. That is sadism in its purest form. And also someone brought up the theory that if Iblis still had the seal on him since Elise didn't cry when he was set free, which is a decent theory. In any case, all of this combined is what gives Mephiles the top spot. He's cunning and manipulative. He's ruthless and deadly. He is, all in all, the closest thing Sonic the Hedgehog has ever gotten to Satan himself. And unless Frontiers proves me wrong, he will never be surpassed by anyone. I'm Tony Sonic, and let me know what you all think is the best Sonic villain in the entire series. As long as your opinion makes sense, I respect it. And you may have also noticed that YouTube has given me access to the join button. Yeah, you all can become members now. I currently have 2 membership tiers which you can check the details of by clicking on that button. And if you feel so inclined, consider becoming a member and you'll get some small perks. With that said, we are back with the Everything Wrong with Sonic Marathon. And Chari has finally covered Sonic 3 and K. After 14 months of waiting. But for what it's worth, it's actually pretty good. See you all next time.